Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Legacy Running Podcast. Today, I'm really excited to debunk a really common myth or just something I hear a lot in the hip space, in the fitness space, and all of the above, really, which is I have X, like I have hip impingement, I have labral tear, I have tendinopathy, and I just need to get really strong to overcome this. I just need to strength train to overcome this. And today I'm going to tell you exactly why I don't think it's the best way forward. I am specifically thinking of one of my clients who is a young mom. She's a working professional, has a daughter, and was hoping to grow her family in the next couple of years continuously. I said that weird. She's just hoping to have more kids in the next coming years. And was a very, very consistent runner with having kids. She wasn't doing as much like marathon or long distance running, but as in between having kids, she was like able to ramp back up. And in this time frame, she started to develop hip pain, which came to be a labral tear and tendinopathy. She was like, yeah, I've just been in the gym lifting really, really heavy. Like I just figured if I lifted really heavy, it would take away my hip pain. I see all these things that it's like your hip flexor isn't tight, it's weak. All of this stuff, like I need to work my glutes more. And she was like, none of it was helping me. And today, I'm really going to go into kind of the why behind this, really specifically kind of calling out hip impingement and even labral tears. Specifically, if you are someone who's dealing with a hip impingement or labral tear, if we're looking at kind of what's going on at the hip perspective, if we're talking about hip impingement, maybe you've heard the words like cam or pincer impingement, which basically means like a cam impingement is like the head of the femur. If it's a ball and socket joint, the head of the femur is too big for the hip socket, or it's that the socket is too small for the ball, which is going to be more of that pincer impingement. And oftentimes, because of the lack of congruency or things just being too tight in there, the labrum can get torn. And the labrum is just this fibrocartilaginous, I almost think of it like, not silly putty, sticky tack. I almost think of it like, I don't know why, it's kind of a weird analogy, but like sticky tack that surrounds the kind of rim and like surface of the acetabulum, which is the socket. And I think of it as like a really glidey sticky tack that like increases the suction and allows the hip to like roll and glide super easily. But you could imagine if things are really cramped in there in certain areas, maybe too much compression is going to rub away from it, and then we can start to get a labral tear. And so we can have pain into the hip because of the lack of room in the hip joint itself, and also maybe some tearing or fraying of that labrum, which can cause things like the tendons around it to start to get tendinopathy, because where we don't have as much congruency, maybe our tendons and muscles are having to work more. And we also might get things like cysts or bursitis, where things are, because there's just so much friction going on, we're starting to get increased rubbing, which is starting to cause more friction and then get irritation to these like packing peanut structures, which can be like the bursitis or even like cysts that are trying to just like decrease how much movement is happening at the hip. So maybe that's an anatomy lesson that no one has ever told you, and hopefully that was helpful. But typically, okay, when I'm looking at someone that has impingement, I feel like the automatic place that your brain goes is, oh my gosh, I am screwed. Like, this is just how I was born. This is my anatomy. And this is just like my path forward forever. And also, I think it feels more intimidating to people because it's not a soft tissue, quote unquote, injury. Like, it's not like something that could heal, like, maybe a Achilles tendinopathy or a bicep strain or a hip flexor strain. Like, I think it feels a little bit more permanent, making it a little bit more daunting for people's brains to kind of go through. And really what I'm doing with sharing this information is I just want to set the stage of like, okay, why can impingement occur? What are the different things that I look at beyond strength training? How I can create a program for people to really get back to running or doing the things that they want to do comfortably. And like, where does strength fall into this? And like, what are the other things that we need to be considering outside of strength to really combat that common myth that I just need to get really, really strong? So when people are thinking about their hip and they're thinking about maybe their hip impingement or labral tear, it can be really alarming because it's not that like soft tissue injury that feels like it can just heal. But let me tell you this, sometimes with hip impingement, we need to think of like the causation of this. Sometimes people really do just have an anatomical makeup of like, maybe their mom had hip impingement and their grandma had hip impingement, and like maybe it is just kind of a general genetic pattern of their body. But another thing I want you to think about is something like this. Okay, I'll give you two examples. Think about bunions in your feet. These are kind of gross examples. So think about bunions in your feet, or think about if you're a person who gets a lot of blisters, or you've ever had a blister. I know for me, like growing up playing soccer, I was just super blister prone. And like through the first couple years of my career as a soccer player, I would get like a handful of blisters. And then honestly, over time, like I just got so many blisters that I literally just had calluses. And it was my body's way of being like, okay, we have a lot of friction at this area. At first, it was super painful and it was super irritable and it was really annoying. And then my body just started laying down thicker tissue because it was like, there's a lot of excess friction at this area. And we need something that's going to be more, not malleable, but more like resilient to this excess friction. So then I just got calluses and I didn't really necessarily have pain anymore. Kind of the same thing with bunions. Like if you have so much excess motion at your foot, your body's going to lay down extra bone because it physically needs somewhere to like lay that extra attenuation of forces. Like if I'm always like having too much motion at my foot and I'm really collapsing over that toe, and then I'm starting to get like that bunion, it's your body's way of like creating excess stability where you have more mobility. Same thing for the hip. If I have too much mobility at the hip, what my body can do, or I'm getting too much compression and kind of grinding in certain areas at my hip, my body's just going to start to lay down bone to try to compensate for that excess mobility that is happening there. So over time, in the same way that I got the calluses from getting the blisters, maybe you're a person that's actually developed impingement as you have progressed through your career or your lifestyle, as a way for your body to compensate from the excess mobility that is there. We see this a lot in professional athletes that are like plyometric athletes. So we think of people like basketball players or like soccer players sometimes, but basketball is like the best example that I can think of. Sometimes, so for them to create more stability and like more availability for them to jump really high, what we can see in their hips is they actually develop stiffer hips, specifically into internal rotation. So they actually get like less mobility so that when they jump, their hip has a more like a stronger backboard to be able to like propel and move upwards. So sometimes we'll see this in baseball players, like pitchers, like okay, maybe this is getting on topic, but as pitchers are developing, like you'll see they'll have way less mobility through their pitching arm specifically because it's creating this general stiffness that is going to allow them to have more reactivity and elasticity to really like throw that ball significantly harder. So it can be like a caused thing over time. And that's just something notable to think of. So when I'm looking at, okay, what are the things that are actually driving your availability to have hip pain, it's not just going to be strength. Like a baseball player might have a really strong shoulder. Like maybe this baseball player is getting pain after his pitching career. He's probably very, very strong, but he's potentially developed that lack of mobility. And then therefore he's having pain with certain tasks that require that much mobility. Another example is like for that client that I was talking about, where she was like, I just need to get really, really strong so I can overcome my hip and labral tear pain. Well, here's the thing. Like she was strong. Like she was very strong. She actually went through pelvic floor PT postpartum, and she was extremely consistent with her strength training program. And she was just trying to add more strength. But for her, what we actually needed was more control and more available mobility at the hip joint to allow her to not have as much compression that was there. So here are a couple things that I'm looking at outside of strength, and maybe including strength too, when someone's like, I have pain and I want to be able to get back to running. So specifically things that I'm looking at, if I like have someone with me and they're in person and we're doing PT and all of this stuff, like I just want to see like, do they have like appropriate mobility at the hip? Like, are they able to get into certain positions, either if I'm doing it for them passively or they're doing it for them actively? Like, where are they like actually limited? And is there something that can make it feel better? So for example, like if someone's like, I can't get past 90 because I have hip impingement. So when I squat, it's super painful. But I'm like, oh, let's put you on hands and knees and see if you can rock back. Same compression, same amount of compression that is needed in a squat versus the hands and knees pattern. But they're able to get back into their hands and knees. I'm like, oh, well, you have the available space. There's just something about the mechanics and the way that you're doing it isn't allowing you to get back there comfortably. So what if we change some of your mechanics with your squatting so it's more similar to that hands and knees rock back, and then all of a sudden you have more space for your hip to go through that squatting motion. There's less compression, less irritation on the hip joint, hip cartilage, and the labrum, and then you can start to kind of like snowball and resolve from there. Other things that I'm thinking about is like, do they have weakness that has been created from pain, or do they just generally have weakness in certain areas? This is a really important delineation. I think sometimes you're like, oh, my hip flexors aren't, there's that thing where it's like, my hip flexors aren't tight, they're just weak. Sometimes your hip flexors can be weak because it's just so painful. Like your hip is just so painful that you actually can't strengthen your hip flexor anymore because it's painful to do so. I see this with so many of my clients, and it's like, well, doing like a classic like banded hip flexion or like a march. Sure, their hip flexor is weak, but it's like, it's not appropriate to strength train that because it's going to be so painful for them to be able to do that. So I'm looking and just seeing where are they maybe lacking with strength versus recruitment, and like what is maybe the causation of that? Is it because it's painful, or is it because they just like generally have a weakness in that area? So I'm kind of looking at those things, and then I'm also just ruling out like other things. Like I want to look above the joint of the hip, so I want to look at the back, see if there's any like neural involvement, see if there's any back mobility or stability or recruitment or, nerve deficits, and see if that is kind of playing into the hip. I know for me personally, like that's a huge thing. Like I have a lack of recruitment and I have a lack of stability into my right low back, which honest to goodness, like doing stuff that works and helps my back with its specific deficits and challenges actually helps my hip more so than doing like standard hip things. And then I'm also just looking like below and seeing, okay, is there anything like unique? Are they having knee pain or ankle pain or lack of mobility at the knee? All of this stuff. I can't tell you the amount of times that I've worked with people who have had chronic ankle sprains, or they have torn their ACL in like high school or something. And now they're like a 35 to 55-year-old woman. They never fully rehabbed from that. They've been compensating around that. And now they have developed this hip pain. And it's like, once we kind of level set like the knee and the ankle, they're like, oh my gosh, my hip is starting to feel so much better. So there's a bunch of things that I'm looking at besides strength. And honestly, guys, like strength is a pretty challenging metric. If I have, let's make this really simple. If I have a lot of pain into my ankle because I just sprained it, it's not like I am not going to perform well on any strength maneuvers. Like there's no strength test that I'm going to perform well on. Maybe you need to look and see like, why did I sprain it? Like what range of motion I have, how much swelling I have. Like we need to just kind of start with some of those simpler metrics. And then once things are not as painful, then maybe you can look at the strength testing. But it's the same thing with the hip, where it's like, if you're at a certain level of irritability, like I'm actually not worried about how strong you are. I'm worried about what's comfortable, what's not comfortable. Is there anything else contributing to it? So on and so forth. So to be honest, I'm so uninterested in your strength if your hip is painful in the beginning stages. And those are some of the things that I'm looking at from like a movement, rehab, whatever perspective. Two other things that I'm looking at that honestly, like, okay, maybe people are talking about this first one, but no one's talking about the second one. Okay, like let me just literally tell you, no one's talking about the second one. So first we kind of went over like big overview, what is hip impingement, all of this stuff, why this can occur. Now we're just looking at the specific things that I look at, and then we're going to end with like, okay, how do we create a program that kind of moves you out of that? But this next one of like things that I look at specifically is for my runners specifically, or honestly for my active people, like my people that they like to go to cycle classes. They like to run a couple times a week. They like to do strength training. They like to Peloton. They like to do Pilates. They like to hike. They like to do like certain boutique classes. Like whatever it is, I'm looking at your general load and volume that you are doing onto your hip. For my runners, I literally talked to someone today who was like, or not today, I talked to someone yesterday who was like, my hip pain got significantly worse when I was training for my half marathon. And she laid out exactly what she was doing. She said, if I was off, like if I was sick or had a busy weekend and I missed some of my training, I literally would make up for my last training in this current week. Or I was training for this and I was training for the half marathon. I literally ran fast for every single race or every single run. And she was like, for cross training, I was doing so much cross training. I was crossfitting, I was cycling, I was doing all of these things. And it was like, her volume was absolutely through the roof. Like she had so much volume that she was doing, and she was doing strength training with her with her CrossFit class, but nothing was like slow and stability focused. And she's actually like a very mobile person. So doing these like high intensity, high fast moves actually wasn't stress relieving for her hip. Everything was stressful for her hip. If you imagine that difference that I talked about earlier of like, okay, the person doing a squat past 90 and having pain versus doing like that quadruped or hands and knees rock back and squatting into pain. Imagine, and then maybe let's say we worked with that person or I worked with that person and then we got her back to squatting comfortably. But for her to have the appropriate mechanics to not have pain, she was going to like hold a weight in front of her. She was going to drop back to a bench. And there was like two, cues that she was thinking about. And it really allowed her to get back into that squat really, really comfortably. And that was the way she could do it. She could do it well. Well, imagine if she's just thrown into a CrossFit class and she has to do like front squats and back squats and deadlifts and box jumps and all this stuff, like strength training, like that squat that she was working on in a slow, controlled, efficient manner for her. If that was comfortable, and then she's just thrown into these other things and she doesn't have the availability to like create that really good control that feels really good for her right now, well, then doing that quote unquote strength training at the CrossFit class is just going to be too much and it's going to be another flare up for her. So when I'm looking at things for my clients, I'm looking at what are things in your like your strength, your cardio and strength training, your activities, like what are your activities and are any of them making you sore or can any of them make you sore to a certain capacity? And let's do this. Let's figure out what capacity you can do and let's just have a dialed approach of like, okay, you can go to CrossFit once a week and you know that that's comfortable. You can run 30 minutes twice a week and you know that that's comfortable. You can go for a hike with your girlfriends for an hour on the weekend with like moderate incline and you know that that's comfortable. Okay, let's make your week with those four things. Let's do a CrossFit or let's do a run on Monday, a CrossFit class on Wednesday, let's do a run on Friday, and let's do your hike on Saturday. And let's have a couple rest days in between. Let's give you a chance to like I call it tissue tolerance. Like, let's give you a chance to like flood up the hip with something that might irritate it. And then, but not to the point that it's like spilling over. And then let's allow yourself to recover that next day. And then let's do something different, meaning like we're doing the running and then the cross training and then the running again and then a hike. Like, let's just space it out and give yourself a little bit more chance to go into the activity that might be irritating and then relax from it and recover from it. And then go into the activity and relax and recover from it. When I'm thinking specifically of the hip cartilage and the labrum from like hip impingement or a labral tear, this is not a tissue that is like your bicep muscle or your hip flexor muscle or your hamstring muscle, where it's like if I have a bicep tear and I go to do a bicep curl, it's extremely painful in that moment because it has a bunch of neural receptors to it. My hip labrum and my joint cartilage is an inert tissue, meaning it doesn't have those same receptors that I can feel in my muscle. So therefore, when I'm doing something, the pain might not come on right in that exact moment, depending on your irritability, because it doesn't have the same receptors. It takes a little bit more time for that pain to build. So we're just being mindful of the whole week and we're like not pushing into something crazy because maybe the pain response isn't going to come on right then and there, but maybe it's going to come on an hour after or the next day or something. So with my clients, with having this like volume control, this week plan, it allows you to be like, okay, I'm going to allow myself to do the activity, have my tissue recover, do the activity, have my tissue recover, as opposed to just go, 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 go when it feels good. And then you're like, and then you've done too much. You're like, you have exceeded your tissue's tolerance capacity. You've exceeded the tissue tolerance. And now you're just in pain and you need to rest for like 2 weeks and then you'll try to get back into it. So that is the second thing I look at. The first is just kind of like all of the things of the hip. We're looking at how it moves, like the mechanics behind it. We're looking at the strength. We're looking at like the is it straight? Is it weak because it's weak, or is it weak because it's painful? We're looking above and below the joint, seeing if there's anything like fascinating going on there. And we're just trying to see like, what can you do comfortably? Number two, with specifically like running and or activity, how much can you do? And then just kind of mapping out that volume plan of what allows you to like do the things that you want to do without royally pissing anything off. And then the last thing that I'm thinking about, which again, I don't know where in my life that I just got so passionate about this. Probably some mix of like working in the clinic and also doing more like online coaching with people. But I have just gotten so fascinated with lifestyle factors. Okay. Lifestyle factors can be anything that is maybe adjunct to your like cardio plan or like your kind of strength, mobility, stability, like motor control, movement plan that I kind of talked about first. But it's things like stress. It's things like sitting. Like if you have hip impingement and you have to sit a lot, like don't you think that's going to cause a lot of compression at the hip? It's things like sleeping positions. If you're sleeping with your knee all the way up to your chest and you're waking up really irritated, like don't you think that would kind of lead into maybe you not feeling great with your running? Gosh, it's work. Like I have a client right now who changed jobs and she was crushing it in the Empower Hip program, like absolutely crushing it. And then she changed jobs. She has significantly longer shifts. She's a physical therapist. She has to like lift people's body parts. She's doing way more manual therapy and like manual labor. And her symptoms are so much significantly worse. And it's like, we could blame it on her strength, or we could be like, wow, you have a lot of load that you have to take on throughout the day. You're working 10-hour shifts. That's extremely uncomfortable. And we're seeing how that is like playing into her symptoms. So for lifestyle factors for my clients, honestly, what I'm doing in my program, in the Empower Hip program, is our first week together where I call it the heat sheet. So it's hip easers, aggravators, and your current tolerance. And we're just noting anything in your life that is relatively stressful for your hip. My long commute to work, working 10-hour days, sitting for long periods of time at my desk, lifting and moving furniture, travel, sitting on airplanes for a long period of time. We do this not to be like, I hate this word, but like anal or be like, crazy about it. But we do it to just be like, oh, like that's actually a larger aggravator than I could have ever thought. Two examples here, or maybe one example here. One of my current clients in the Empower Hip program was like, oh my gosh, this gal she has a labral tear. She's a collegiate athlete, came out of college and is probably in her like late 20s, early 30s, and is just working. She's working, she's busy professional consistently, and she just loves to run. She loves to run. She loves to strength train. She has worked with a physical therapist. She's worked with a run coach and still just feel like she's not gotten back to running super comfortably, and came into the Empower Hip program for just a new approach and like kind of a fresh approach on the system. And with her strength training, like she's pretty strong. She's pretty stable. She has great mobility. And there was just a couple of things that we needed to tweak with her programming. The biggest two things that we worked on was just her running volume. Like she really does struggle to do high intensity things back to back to back. So she like lives in a city. So she would run a couple of days a week and then she would go to these classes and then she's biking all over the place. She goes on walks, all these things. So we just kind of worked on spacing her week out, but specifically for her lifestyle, she was doing great with that. So she's doing her strength training 3 times a week, stability and strength training 2 to 3 times a week. She's running 3 times a week. We kind of have a plan down for what to do. She's able to do an international flight, no problem. And she's like, I'm still just having this like semi-low level like load of pain and I can't quite put my finger on what it is. And I'm like, you know what? You've done really great with all of these things. And I was like, hey, you work from home, right? And she was like, yes. And I was like, what's your sitting? Like, what's your sitting like at home? Like, what's your positions like at home? Like, what are you kind of like, what's your schedule? And she's like, oh my gosh, like I She's like, I sit all day. And she's like, I sit in the weirdest positions, like knee to my chest, on my knees, on my feet. Like, she's like, I just sit in the weirdest positions all day. And I was like, I'm curious how you would do if we had a little bit more structure and discipline around that. And I'm not saying like, I feel like when people are like, I need to sit better at work, they're like, I need to have perfect posture and like all this stuff. I'm like, literally could care less. Like, you do not need to have perfect posture. However, if you are a person that has that increased compression at the hip, sitting is going to decrease the compression, or is going to increase the compression at the hip. And especially if you're sitting in these really weird positions all day. So for her, I was like, hey, like, what if I was like, do you have a standing desk? She's like, yes, I have a standing desk. And it's like really easy for me to use. I just don't use it. I was like, what if we're just like, okay, let's just change positions. Like, I don't know, 4 times a day. So like morning, you have like a standing session and then a sitting session, afternoon, standing session, sitting session. Like, what is that something that we can do to kind of mitigate that amount of compression that you're having at the hip with sitting? And she was able to try that and made a little bit of a difference, which honestly is what we're looking for. Another one of my clients had, and I actually really got this from this first client, but another one of my clients was like, just felt amazing on the weekends, like just for a myriad of things, like lack of stress. But one of the biggest things was like just at work, she would be so locked in on certain projects, and she has impingement and a labral tear. And what we did that same sitting maneuver for her, where it was like, okay, we're going to sit and then we're going to stand, we're going to sit and we're going to stand for some cadence of the day. And she was like, this has made a marked improvement. She also like had made great progress with her running. She had made great progress with her strength training and like strength and stability training. And that was just kind of the final piece. And we were finally able to like layer in one last factor of, she felt best at work if she was able to run before work. So run or strength train, running more than strength training. But we were like, perfect. Like, you're running 4 to 5 days a week. It's like, let's make sure that like some of those runs are on the weekday, if not most of the runs are on the weekday, so that when you're going into work, you're feeling a lot better. And it was really cool to be like, wow, running used to be something that would make me feel pain. And now this is something that's actually like my greatest superpower that can like change my symptoms as I'm in the thing that is challenging for myself. So I share all of this to say that like when I'm thinking about creating a true program that is going to make progress for someone, it's not just strength training. Like, if it's just strength training, you'd probably feel better by now. But when I'm thinking about working with gals in the Empower Hip program, it really is this process of like discovering like, okay, what actually irritates you? Like, what are your easers, things that make you feel better? What are the things that make you feel worse, both with strength and stability moves, with running, and with lifestyle factors? And just seeing like, okay, if you have pain with lunging and like lateral lunging, like, are there ways that we can do that is going to make it feel better? Like, let's not play this weird game where we're like, oh, we need to just increase our core strength and like just these generic like glute, like let's increase our glute recruitment. I'm like, no, let's make the thing that doesn't feel good, let's make it feel good. And let's test and retest. Like, let's have you lunge and then let's do something and let's have you lunge again and see if that feels better. Like, let's get really freaking specific with our exercises. Let's get really specific with, is there something going on at the hip, above the hip, below the hip? Let's address that with our exercises, both strength and stability. Let's really address like, okay, what can you do? What tolerance do you currently have? And create like your weekly program around that. And let's also talk about lifestyle factors, stress, travel, work, all of these things. And let's create game plans around it. Like, the amount of times that I've created a travel plan for decreasing hip pain with my clients, all of them. It's actually all of them. Okay. So those are the things that I'm thinking about. Those are the things that I'm thinking about when I'm working with my clients and I'm creating their pain. It's as comprehensive as that. And the last thing that I'll say, the second to last thing that I'll say is like, the plan is it's breathable. Like, let's say we have a plan where it's like, okay, you're going to do these 3 exercises 3 times a week. You're going to run 3 times this week and go on that hike with your girlfriends this week. And then at work, you're just going to focus on sitting and standing 3 times this day. If that's the plan and things go amazing, then it's like, great, let's progress the next week. If that's the plan and things go literally awful, let's troubleshoot. And then maybe we just stay the same for that week, or cut something off or change something over to allow you to actually make progress with where you're at and not just have random progressions based off of like I don't know, like some generic rehab program. So those are the things that I'm thinking about for my clients. And then this is the last thing that I'll say. Gosh, maybe this is second to last thing that I'll say. The joy is, guys, once you make it through this phase and you're like thinking of all the things and you're working through all of the exercises and you're addressing the lifestyle factors, you are going to get better. And once you get better and you're able to build to just really having to do strength training and a little bit of maybe stability exercises to kind of keep things tidy, and you've built to a higher comfortable volume of running or doing the things that you want to do, and lifestyle factors don't bother you as much, then from there, then you can progress to a just generic strength training program. And that's really going to check your boxes for what you need to do for maintenance. With my clients, after we've worked on those things, I really do try to progress them up to just like generic strength exercises that you would see on Instagram, like a deadlift or a squat or a single leg squat or hip airplane or all of those things. And that is enough to maintain where they're at. And they don't have to be as nitpicky with these little things. But I do think there has to be this like initial phase of really being nitpicky with these things and then progressing to quote unquote normal life, where you can be a normal runner and do the things that you want to do. And the last thing I'll say, which I get this question all the time, is like, when do I do surgery? Like, what do you think about surgery? So on and so forth. What I have seen to be true is when people have gone through this phase and they progress up to that strength training phase, if they just keep dipping back down into pain, like if they just keep dipping back down into pain, that is honestly when I've seen, and I mean like, they're back to running a certain capacity and they're back to, living their life at a certain capacity and things are like generally good, but they're maintaining and they're doing the progress work. But when they're still just like still having pain for long periods of time and they're not operating well outside of their means with what they have built up to, that's honestly when I've seen surgery work the best. So those are my 2 thoughts on that. If you guys are like, oh my gosh, this is comprehensive, like this is specific, this is how I think I will make my next step into being able to run comfortably this summer, I am opening 4 spots for the Empower Hip program, 4 one-on-one spots for the Empower Hip program this April. I literally would love to be all up in there with you. Like I tell my clients all the time, I'm like, I want to know everything. Like I want to know how your travel went, both like was it fun and like how did the plane ride go? How are you feeling with sitting at work? How are you feeling with your exercises? Like let's make these nitty-gritty adjustments now for 3 months now, so you never have to think about this again. Like I'm going to tell you, I'm not budgeting my miles. I'm not worried about international flights. I'm not worried about sitting and standing at work. Like I'm able to live my life because I put in the nitty-gritty work for a condensed period of time and really combated the issues that my body had so that I could get back to running half marathons, ultra marathons, consistently running, consistently strength training. And this is exactly what my clients are doing now. So if you're interested in joining the Empower Hip program this April, I have 4 one-on-one spots. Feel free to apply in the show notes. That will bring you to a free strategy call. Y'all, this strategy call, I'm here for you. Like if it's not a good fit, it's not a good fit. I'm not going to force you into anything. The amount of times I've gotten on strategy calls and actually just found a physical therapist for someone in their area, countless. So we'd love to chat with you on this call and see if you'd be a good fit for one of my one-on-one spots in the month of April. I will only take 4 new people, and I won't have another new opening for Empower Hip program until late summer. So would love to chat with you on a strategy call, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I look forward to chatting with you all soon.